Hey, are you looking to make disciples? In fact, you even know you want to be making disciples, that you should be, but you're scared you're going to have to be the expert, that you're going to have to be the one that knows everything, that can answer every question, and it holds you back from doing what it is you know you should be doing and what it is you know you want to be doing. What we're going to do is we're going to look at two different options of how to make disciples, and then if you stick around till the end, I'm going to show you a very practical tool that you can use to implement one of these ideas. So here we go. As I see it, there are basically two ways to approach making disciples. One way is I go up the mountain to hear from God. That's a mountain right there in case you can't recognize it. I go up the mountain to hear from God, and then I come back and I tell DASF simply means a disciple, an apprentice, a student, or a follower of Jesus. All the same thing. People refer to it differently. I go up the mountain to hear from God, and then I come back down and I tell them what it is that I think God said. The other approach is I teach the person I'm discipling to go up the mountain themselves and hear from God themselves. So, let's just walk through these real quick, but before we do, I want to share something important with you. It's something that'll help you out with this and in making disciples. Is over the past year or so, as I've worked with men and coached them, one of the big things that always seems to come up is helping them find their purpose for life. What is their life all about? And so I put together a short 5-day challenge. Sorry, ladies, but it's just for men. It's 5 days, one-on-one with me on the phone. And what we're going to do over those 5 days is we're going to help you figure out what is your purpose for your life. Not for the rest of your life. That seems to intimidate people. But let's just shoot for the next 12 months. So all the information is in the show notes of how to do that. Go down there, check it out. It's one-on-one, you and me. The cost is $10, but the $10 doesn't come to me. There's actually three nonprofit organizations listed down there that I support. And if you would donate $10 to one of those, take a screenshot of the donation, send it to me. My phone number and my email are down there. Send it to one of those. I'll get in touch with you and we'll get this going. All right, now let's get back to the two different ways to approach making disciples. The first way is, I think, the normal way that we do this, and the way I did this for years and years and years, is I would go up the mountain myself, and I would hear from God. In other words, study, listen to other people, learn, and then I would come down to tell my disciple what God says. But here's the problem I realized was happening, is that I was running everything God said through Brad's filter. That's supposed to be a filter there. I was running everything that God said through my filter. Now, I was trying to pass on to the person I'm discipling what I thought God said. I wasn't trying to mislead them, but I have a filter. We all have a filter through which we interpret what God is saying. And so I like to say I know my filter is off a little bit, that it doesn't perfectly pass through everything that God says exactly the way God says it. I know my filter is off. The problem is I don't know where my filter is off. If I knew where my filter was off, I would fix my filter. But the problem is I don't, and probably neither do you either or anybody else. We all have a filter that is off just a little bit. That's my take. So what happens is I go up the mountain, I hear from God, and then I come down, pass it through my filter, and pass it on as best as I understood what God said to my disciple. The other method is I don't go up the mountain at all. Well, I do, but I don't go up myself. I bring my disciple with me to go up the mountain so that I'm not teaching my disciple, the one I'm making. He's actually, or she is actually, and this is very important, a disciple of Jesus. I am just a tool which God is using to make this person a disciple of Jesus. So they are not a disciple of Brad. They don't have to think like me. They don't have to understand like me. They don't have to act like me. They need to learn how to think like Jesus and be like Jesus and act like Jesus. That's what we're trying to do as disciple makers, is to get them to be like Jesus. So the best way I've found is I take this person and I teach them and show them how to go up the mountain themselves and hear from God. Then nothing has to pass through my filter. They are learning how to hear directly from God and then do what God says. Now, let's break these two down. What happens? So in this version where I'm the one going up the mountain, who is the expert? Who is the one that has to get everything from God and get it correctly, and all the pressure is on them? Me. I'm the expert. This person that I'm discipling looks to me as the expert. Probably not a good position to put yourself in. Who is this person learning to hear from? Me. Not God, me. Who is this person learning from? Me. Not God, they're learning from me. And who is this person learning to obey? They're learning to obey what Brad says. Okay? That can turn into a problem because then I have to know everything really, really well. What about this method? As I teach the person to go up the mountain themselves and hear from God, who are they learning from? The Holy Spirit, the Bible tells us, is teaching them. God is teaching them directly. Who are they learning to hear from? Not me. They're learning to hear from the Holy Spirit. They're learning to hear from God directly. Who are they learning from? They are learning directly from the Holy Spirit, not from me. And who are they learning to obey? Not me. They are learning to obey the Holy Spirit. So let's look at these real quick. In option number 1, where I go up the mountain or you go up the mountain, which is I think the normal way that we think of this, is the person doing the discipling has to know all this stuff and hear from God, and then they pass it on to the person. In that model, who is the expert? You are. Who has the responsibility of making sure they get it right, what God is saying? You. In this model, where you're teaching the person to go up the mountain by themselves, who is the expert? In this person's eyes, who is the expert? It's not you. It's the Holy Spirit. It's God. Who has the responsibility to teach them correctly? Not you. It's God. The Holy Spirit does. Now, with these two models, and this is important in making disciples, we have to do things in a way that are easily reproducible. In other words, if you're making this person a disciple, you need to be able to teach and train them in a way that they can easily go out and reproduce it with another person so that they can be out making disciples. Because that's one thing, a primary thing Jesus has told his disciples to do is go make more disciples. Which of these methods is easily reproducible? Well, this method, 1, requires me to do a lot of studying and make sure I'm getting it right. But 2, and I think more importantly, this method requires you, to be in many places making many disciples. And I can't be everywhere at the same time, and I can't even be everywhere at different times because there's just too many places to be for me to be there. So this is limited simply based on one thing. It's one person, and that one person, whether it be you or me or somebody else, can't be in every place or many places. They're limited by time and space. In this way, there's no limitation. The Holy Spirit can be everywhere at the same time, right? So if I'm teaching a person to go up the mountain themselves and hear from God, they can easily turn around and teach another person to go up the mountain and hear from God themselves, because they don't have to be the expert and they don't have to be responsible for making sure they get it right, what God says. That's God's responsibility. Their responsibility is to get the person to learn how to hear from, learn from, and obey God. So easily reproducible. Now that's the tool I want to give you. A very simple, easily reproducible tool that you can use. And I call it a Bible discovery group. People call it different things. But here's how it works. You just ask somebody after you've talked to them a little bit, hey, would you like to get together and read the Bible and see what God shows us? I'm not smart enough to teach you, but together we can read it, and I trust that God will show us something. Okay, so if they say yes, that's great. It could be one person you're doing it with. It could be 2, 3. It could be a group, whatever. You're the facilitator. Don't get stressed by this. It's not difficult. You take a passage of the Bible, whatever you want to do. You can do a whole chapter. You can do, a lot of Bibles have headings. You could read one heading section. And then you ask, after you read that section out loud, somebody reads it out loud, maybe 2 or 3 times, you simply ask very deep theological questions such as, so what do you guys think about that? What jumped out at you out of that? Is there something you didn't understand? Is there something you liked? Something you didn't like? These are not complicated questions. You're just trying to get people to interact with what you just read. That's it. And here's the important thing that'll really step this up and move it from just a Bible study to discipling. At the end, these are 2 questions. You might want to write these down. 2 questions. The first one is, what did God show you that you want to take away from this time? What did God show you that you want to take away from this time? One thing that God showed you that you want to take away. Okay, that's the first question. However you want to ask it, it's what is the one thing that God showed you? You want to get them to focus on just one thing. Let's try to focus in on one thing, the big thing that you think God showed you, and that goes for each individual. They can be all different. It doesn't have to be the same thing that every person gets. The second question is, making disciples, teaching them to obey, is based on that one thing, how do you need to obey what God has shown you? Based on that one thing, how do you need to obey what God has shown you? And so this is a very reproducible method where you are teaching people to go up the mountain themselves and hear from God. You are not teaching, you are not the answer man in this Bible discovery group. If they ask you a question, well, what's the answer to this? You say, that's a good question. I don't know. Let's read the passage again, see if we can figure it out. And a fallback, as always, we got Google. You can get on there and see what other people are saying. But just remember, ultimately, you don't want to teach these people to learn from other people. You want to teach this person you're discipling to learn directly from God. Hey, if you got something out of this, if you thought this was beneficial, consider liking this, maybe even sharing it with somebody that you think it might help. You can even subscribe if you want. If you found something really useful, maybe make a comment. If you think this is totally off base and I'm totally crazy, it won't be the first time I've been called crazy, but just put a comment in there. I don't take it personal. You can blast me. You can say it however you want. I won't take it personal. And I hope this was useful for you.